You won. Your new job is to travel the world and be happy. At first, such words may sound like the dream of a child or the folly of a poet, yet if one listens carefully, there is truth hidden in them. For if we measure success not by the coins in our pocket, but by the light in our spirit, then indeed the highest occupation is joy itself. Too often we imagine that work must be heavy, difficult, and full of sorrow, as though sweat and misery are its only wages. But the truest labor is to live with wonder, to walk through each day as if it were a garden entrusted to your care. Traveling the world is not only a matter of ships, planes, or distant roads. It is first a matter of sight. For there are those who walk the streets of their own city, yet remain blind to the marvel of it, while others, standing still, can discover whole worlds in the turning of a leaf or the smile of a stranger. The job is not to cover miles, but to see more deeply, to look at the ordinary until it reveals itself as extraordinary. A person who carries such eyes has already begun the greatest journey, even if their feet have hardly moved. Happiness, then, is not a prize given at the end of life's struggle, but an assignment to be practiced every day. Just as one trains the body by exercise, so too the heart must be trained in gratitude, in courage, in hope. To be happy is not to ignore sorrow, but to carry it wisely, knowing that even in difficulty the world still holds beauty worth noticing. Happiness becomes a duty, because when one learns it, he spreads it, and his very presence becomes a gift to others. The unhappy heart spreads shadows, the joyful one lights a path. Consider the world as a school with no final graduation. Every culture, every voice, every land is a lesson. The crowded markets teach patience, the silent mountains teach humility, the child at play teaches wonder. When one travels, not merely as a consumer of sights, but as a learner, then each day becomes a lecture hall, and every person is a professor of the human condition. To refuse such lessons is to remain ignorant, no matter how many books one has read. But to receive them is to become truly wise, for the world itself becomes your library. Yet joy is not laziness. To wander without purpose is not happiness, but escape. True happiness requires discipline, the discipline to rise each morning with thankfulness, to see work not as drudgery but as service, to balance rest with responsibility. Just as a musician must practice to play freely, so too must the soul practice gratitude, patience, and love before happiness flows naturally. The world may tempt us with indulgence, but the one who learns balance discovers a deeper and lasting joy. And so, the greatest victory lies in gratitude. For he who gives thanks in every season, whether in feast or famine, has already won more than riches can buy. Gratitude turns the bitter into sweet, the little into enough, and the journey itself into a reward. To be told, your job is to be happy, is not to be handed an easy task, but the noblest of assignments. For it requires the courage to see beauty where others see only burden, to walk lightly even in heavy times, and to bless the world with a heart at peace. Thus you have won indeed. Your work is not behind a desk or within a factory, but upon the wide earth, within the deep sky, and inside the chambers of your own soul. Your task is not to chase happiness as if it were a hidden treasure, but to live it, to carry it, and to share it. And in doing so, you not only travel the world, you transform it. We live in a world where many have been taught to equate work with suffering, as though to earn one's bread, one must first sacrifice every ounce of delight. People wake at dawn, drag themselves into routines that numb their hearts, and return home with shoulders bent as though they have carried a mountain all day. But such a view of work is a distortion, a shadow cast by fear and habit. The truth is that life's truest work was never meant to be a sentence of punishment, but rather a calling into joy. The task of a human being is not merely to endure life, but to engage with it so fully that each duty, each moment, becomes charged with meaning. Work, when seen rightly, is not something separate from joy. It is joy expressed in action. If one watches a child at play, one notices something remarkable. The child exerts energy, builds, creates, sweats, and sometimes even stumbles. Yet there is no complaint, no sense of misery in the effort. The child is absorbed because the activity aligns with delight. That is the picture of how all work was meant to be, a dance between effort and joy. The tragedy is that many grow older and forget this natural union, replacing wonder with weariness. But the principle remains: the more one can bring delight into labor, the more labor is transformed into living. Work ceases to be slavery when it becomes an expression of what one loves, and even necessary duties can be infused with meaning if they are connected to something larger than oneself. There is also a dangerous misconception that joy is only to be found in grand achievements, rare vacations, or moments of escape. Yet the deeper wisdom reveals otherwise. Joy is discovered in the midst of ordinary tasks, when one chooses to engage with them fully. Washing dishes can be misery if seen as a burden, yet it becomes almost sacred if seen as an act of care for the household. The office desk becomes a prison if approached with resentment, but it can become a workshop of growth and service if approached with gratitude. The difference lies not in the task itself, but in the spirit with which it is carried out. Joy is not withheld until life is perfect. It is planted in the soil of imperfection and grows where gratitude waters it. This truth also challenges the false belief that work and happiness are enemies. In reality, they are companions, provided one learns to harmonize them. To labor for endless hours in something that empties the soul will never bring happiness, no matter the wage. Yet to pursue happiness without any discipline will lead only to idleness and despair. The task, then, is to find that place where one's effort intersects with one's delight. That is the space where true vocation lives, the work that feels less like a chain and more like a calling. When one steps into such alignment, the hours do not feel stolen but invested, and even weariness is tinged with satisfaction rather than regret. A great error many commit is believing that joy must always come to them passively, like sunlight entering a window. But joy is not passive, it is cultivated. One must learn to see it in the ordinary, to practice it in the midst of routine, to draw it out from experiences that at first seem barren. Even a field that looks empty can yield a harvest if tilled with patience. In the same way, one's labor, no matter how small, can bear the fruit of joy if approached with the right heart. The baker who kneads dough is not merely making bread, he is sustaining life. The teacher who repeats the same lesson for the 100th time is not merely filling a syllabus, she is shaping futures. When one learns to see the deeper purpose behind the task, joy naturally arises. Consider too that joy in work does not mean the absence of difficulty. A mountain climber struggles, sweats, and sometimes bleeds, yet still calls the climb exhilarating. A gardener bends under the sun, pulls weeds, and dirties the hands, yet still delights in the blossoms. The presence of effort and even hardship does not cancel joy, rather, it deepens it, because joy often flows strongest when one has poured something of oneself into the task. To live a life in which work is joy is not to avoid difficulty, but to embrace it with the knowledge that effort is shaping not only the task, but also the soul that undertakes it. Ultimately, to understand that life's work is joy is to free oneself from the prison of complaint. The labor of existence is not meant to crush but to elevate, not to strip us of happiness but to invite us into deeper forms of it. Work is not the enemy of joy, it is the arena in which joy is tested, proven, and expressed. When one embraces this truth, even the simplest tasks become dignified, even the longest days bear light, and life itself ceases to feel like a burden to be carried and begins to feel like a gift to be lived. Perspective is the quiet teacher that changes everything without altering the facts. Two people may walk the same road, under the same sky, with the same burdens on their backs, yet one complains of the dust while the other marvels at the horizon. The road is identical, but the eyes are not. This is the power of perspective. It is not the world that must always change, but the way we choose to see it. A shift in sight can turn labor into purpose, struggle into growth, and obstacles into teachers. The world does not hand us happiness freely, rather it offers us countless opportunities to see life differently, and from that vision joy is born. Traveling in its truest sense begins not with a passport or a ticket, but with perception. A person may circle the globe and remain unchanged if they refuse to open their eyes, while another may stay within the borders of a single city yet discover endless wonders by looking deeply into the ordinary. Perspective enlarges the heart. It teaches that beauty does not depend on distance, nor meaning on novelty, but on the ability to truly see. A cracked wall may be dismissed as ugliness by one person, yet seen as a record of time, resilience, and story by another. The street vendor selling bread is invisible to the hurried passerby, yet to someone with perspective, he is a guardian of tradition, a provider of sustenance, a reminder that even the smallest roles carry dignity. It is perspective that allows sorrow and joy to dwell together without cancelling each other out. One may face hardship yet remain hopeful if they choose to see difficulty as a chapter, not the whole book. The person who believes suffering is permanent is crushed beneath its weight, but the one who views it as temporary finds the strength to endure. Perspective transforms failures into lessons, losses into reminders of love, and limitations into opportunities for creativity. Where some see a closed door, others see a redirection. The facts remain unchanged, but the meaning drawn from them alters destiny. This gift also teaches us to see people differently. Without perspective, we judge quickly and harshly, reducing others to their mistakes or appearances. With perspective, we remember that every person is a story still being written, carrying chapters of struggle we may never read. To look at another with perspective is to grant them dignity, to assume that behind their flaws lies a longing for joy not unlike our own. When traveling the world, one meets faces of many colors, voices of many tones, customs of many kinds. Perspective transforms these differences from threats into treasures. What divides on the surface unites at the core when seen rightly, for beneath all the variation beats the same human heart, yearning for belonging and meaning. Even within oneself, perspective is essential. The person who sees only their shortcomings will always walk in defeat, no matter their achievements. But the one who acknowledges growth, however small, will continue to rise. Perspective turns envy into gratitude, reminding us that another's success does not diminish our own journey. It turns restlessness into patience, teaching that not all fruit ripens at once. It turns regret into resolve, urging us to carry lessons forward rather than dragging chains behind us. The way we view ourselves becomes the way we live our lives, and perspective shapes that view more than circumstance ever could. Nature offers constant lessons in perspective. The mountain appears immovable, yet from the sky it is but a wrinkle on the earth. The storm feels endless while we stand beneath it, but from a distance it is only a passing shadow. To the ant, a fallen leaf is a mountain. To us, it is nothing more than a step. Perspective reminds us that our troubles, too, are not as absolute as they appear. They may loom large from within, but from the vantage point of time, they often shrink into mere details. Learning to see with this broader view prevents despair and opens the heart to gratitude, even in seasons of trial. The most profound gift of perspective is its ability to reveal meaning where none seems to exist. The daily commute, the simple meal, the quiet evening, all can be infused with depth when seen with fresh eyes. What others call ordinary becomes extraordinary when one remembers that life itself is a fragile and unearned gift. Perspective asks us to look again, to notice, to cherish. It shifts the focus from what is missing to what is present, from what is broken to what is still whole, from what is lost to what remains. In this way, perspective is not merely a way of seeing, it is a way of living, one that transforms even the smallest corner of the world into a place worth traveling. Happiness is often misunderstood as something that comes at the end of effort, like a trophy handed to the victor after a race. Many live as though joy is a distant prize, waiting to be collected once they earn enough money, achieve a certain title, or cross some invisible threshold of success. But such a belief traps life in endless postponement. The truth is that happiness is not waiting at the finish line, it is woven into the journey itself. It is not a prize to be claimed later, but an assignment to be lived now. To wake each morning with the deliberate choice to cultivate joy is one of the highest tasks a person can undertake. This assignment demands discipline, for happiness is not always spontaneous. There are days when circumstances do not cooperate, when disappointments arrive uninvited, and when the heart feels heavy. On such days, happiness is not a natural response but a decision, an act of courage. It does not mean pretending all is well or ignoring pain. It means choosing to search for light even while standing in shadow. Just as the student must learn the lesson regardless of how difficult the material may seem, so too must the soul learn happiness in both comfort and hardship. It is a subject that requires daily study, practiced until it becomes a habit. When seen as an assignment, happiness becomes an active responsibility, not just for the self but for those around us. The presence of one joyful heart lifts the spirits of many, while the bitterness of one discontent soul can spread gloom like a storm. To carry happiness is to contribute to the well-being of a community. A smile, an encouraging word, a grateful spirit. These are not small things, but seeds of change planted into the atmosphere around us. In this sense, the assignment of happiness is not selfish pleasure but service, for one person's joy has the power to strengthen another's courage. The mistake people often make is waiting for life to align perfectly before allowing themselves to be happy. They imagine happiness will come after graduation, after marriage, after the promotion, after retirement, always after something. But when one goal is achieved, another quickly rises to take its place, and happiness is postponed again. The cycle never ends because the mind has been trained to chase rather than to dwell. The assignment, however, is to practice happiness here and now, in the very conditions that exist, even if they are imperfect. To pass this lesson is to discover that happiness is not tied to circumstance, but to perspective and choice. Consider the farmer who waits for perfect weather before planting. He will never see a harvest, for conditions are never flawless. The wise farmer plants anyway, knowing that storms will come but that growth is still possible. In the same way, the person who waits for life to be perfect before being happy will remain barren, while the one who chooses happiness amid imperfection will reap joy even in difficult seasons. The soil of happiness is often rough, but those who work it find unexpected fruit. Happiness as an assignment also calls for gratitude, for it is gratitude that opens the door to contentment. To look at what one has and say, "It is enough," is to free oneself from the endless hunger of comparison. Gratitude trains the eyes to notice blessings that might otherwise go unseen: a meal on the table, a friend's kindness, a moment of peace. These are not small things but foundations upon which happiness is built. Without gratitude, the assignment is impossible, for the ungrateful heart will always find reasons to complain. With gratitude, even the simplest life becomes rich. It is important to remember that this assignment does not exclude pain. Life carries with it sorrow, loss, and struggle, and happiness does not erase these truths. Instead, it teaches us to carry them differently. The person who understands happiness as an assignment does not deny grief, but neither does grief erase their capacity for joy. They learn to hold both together, to weep and yet to smile, to suffer and yet to sing. This balance is not contradiction but wisdom, for it reflects the fullness of human experience. Joy without sorrow becomes shallow, sorrow without joy becomes despair. Happiness, when practiced as an assignment, binds them together into resilience. Seen this way, happiness is not a fragile thing that depends on constant good fortune, but a steady strength that endures across changing seasons. It is not about avoiding storms, but learning to walk through them without losing hope. It is not about escaping work, but about finding delight within it. It is not about waiting for the world to change, but about changing the way one inhabits the world. Each day becomes a test, each moment an opportunity to practice. And every small choice to smile, to give thanks, to encourage becomes part of fulfilling the assignment. The beauty of this truth is that happiness, once practiced faithfully, grows easier. What begins as effort becomes habit, and what begins as habit becomes nature. The one who trains the heart to see joy in simple things soon finds joy everywhere. Happiness stops being a distant dream and becomes a familiar companion. And the remarkable part is that this assignment has no final exam, no single day of graduation. It continues throughout life, and the more one practices it, the more one discovers that happiness was never about achieving a certain end, but about learning to live well in the middle of everything. Every step beyond one's door is a lesson waiting to be learned. The world is not merely a stage upon which we pass our days, but a vast school designed to shape those who are willing to pay attention. Some lessons arrive wrapped in joy and wonder, while others come clothed in hardship, but all are teachers nonetheless. A person who walks through life with an open heart and attentive mind will never be without education, for every place, every culture, and every encounter carries instruction deeper than books alone can provide. To see the world as a classroom is to embrace the truth that learning is not limited to childhood, nor confined to institutions, but is a lifelong calling for the soul. When one travels, even in the simplest ways, the classroom expands. The crowded market teaches the art of patience, reminding us that humanity thrives not in solitude, but in shared spaces of noise and diversity. The mountain teaches humility, standing unmoved by our ambitions, reminding us that time and endurance outlast the brief spark of human pride. The sea teaches both rest and awe, offering peace in its rhythm, yet also commanding reverence in its depth. Every natural landscape is a chalkboard upon which the Creator has written lessons, not in words but in experiences. One only needs to notice the people we encounter along the way are among the greatest teachers of all. The elderly, with their lined faces and slower steps, instructors in resilience and endurance. They teach by their very presence that life is not a sprint but a long journey, and that wisdom is harvested not quickly but through seasons of trial. Children, on the other hand, teach us to wonder again, to look at ordinary things with fresh eyes, to laugh without reason, and to trust without hesitation. The stranger we meet in another culture teaches us to see beyond the narrow walls of our upbringing, reminding us that the human story is broader and richer than the version told in our hometowns. To learn from people requires humility, for it means admitting that others know things we do not, and that wisdom often hides in places we least expect. Failure, too, has a place in this classroom. Mistakes are the harsh but necessary instructors that refine character more than success ever could. When we stumble, we are invited to analyze what went wrong, to adjust, and to rise again stronger. A life without failure may seem desirable, but it would leave us untested, unshaped, and shallow. Just as a teacher assigns difficult problems to stretch the mind, life assigns challenges to stretch the heart. To resist them is to remain undeveloped. To embrace them is to grow in strength and understanding. The failures of yesterday, when seen rightly, become the textbooks of today. The world teaches not only through events and people, but also through silence. There are lessons that can only be heard when the noise of routine is set aside. The stillness of a quiet dawn, the pause before a storm, or the solitude of a long journey alone. All these moments invite reflection, the kind of reflection that no lecture can provide. In silence, one learns to listen to the inner voice, to examine motives, and to discover truths that constant activity conceals. To neglect silence is to miss half the curriculum of life, for many of its deepest lessons whisper rather than shout. Another aspect of seeing the world as a classroom is learning adaptability. Just as a student adjusts to new subjects and methods of instruction, so too must we adjust to the changing seasons of life. A new city, a new role, a new challenge, each demands flexibility. The rigid spirit resists and breaks under pressure, but the adaptable one bends and grows. Travel makes this lesson clear, for every culture has its own rhythm, its own customs, and its own way of doing things. The traveler who insists on their own way learns nothing but frustration, while the one who adapts discovers joy and connection. Adaptability is not about losing one's identity. It is about expanding it, incorporating new wisdom into the person one is becoming. The greatest challenge, however, lies in remembering that lessons are offered daily, even in the ordinary. One does not need to cross oceans to learn from the world. One only needs to pay attention. The neighbor struggling with hardship, the co-worker showing quiet perseverance, the unexpected kindness of a stranger. These moments are as instructive as any distant land. The danger is not that the world lacks lessons, but that we become blind to them, rushing too quickly, assuming we already know all that matters. A true student of life keeps curiosity alive, refusing to believe that growth is finished. Ultimately, to see the world as a classroom is to embrace humility. It is to admit that we do not know everything, that we are forever students, and that life's richest lessons cannot be forced, but must be received. Each encounter, whether joyful or painful, becomes part of the curriculum designed to shape us into wiser, kinder, and more resilient people. Those who walk through the world with this mindset never stop learning, and in turn, never stop growing.